Welcome, Internet Land, to Capitola Village. Before you is my son Malachi and Ted Haas. Ted has a podcast and an event called Innovate. I'm not in the camera for a reason. We wanted to use the beginning of Beachside Tech Talk today to capture a podcast for Ted's Innovate. And it'll be highly produced and put onto his podcast platforms in the near future. Last week, Ted captured an interview with one of the most well-known men in the Silicon Valley and in technology, especially in the faith arena. And maybe he'll talk a bit about that. Everyone really enjoys your podcast, Ted. Thank you for basically doing this here on this platform. You know, it's a Friday, so we get to kind of switch things up a little bit. And I'll give you guys the 3, 2, 1. You can do the official start. And I expect this to be a wonderful experience for both of you and the audience. So here we go, Ted, for your official intro in 3, 2, 2.5, 2 3/4, 2 7/8. Are you ready? 2 15/16. Hold on. 3.
Welcome to the Innovate Podcast, all you listeners, and welcome Malachi.
Hi, Daddy.
So at Innovate, we explore innovation and social impact with the goal of empowering people to solve the world's most important problems.
That's a really good way to blanket topic, the major things that we need to fix. I love that little.
I'm very bullish on California.
Yeah, I'm too, actually.
I'm very bullish on Silicon Valley. In fact, we're both faith guys. I'm motivated by my faith, and I believe this is the best place to be, and I believe we can change the world. In fact, we have already changed the world.
I mean, Silicon Valley really did change the world. If you think about it, if you say that all the Silicon Valley companies weren't there, I really do think we would be like 30 years back because they did so much.
I like to describe it as the new Rome. It's the center. You go all over the world and they talk about the Silicon Valley of,
That's true.
wherever. And this is the original Silicon Valley. The innovation that's not only the innovation that has come out of here, like that supercomputer on my wrist that can hands down beat the best human chess player, like without even trying. Like it is so smart.
It is very impressive.
I'm a bit older than you.
Still,
I'm older than your dad too. Yeah, he's in his 40s. I'm in my 50s.
That's what we said.
Yeah. So I can remember before these things exist. This used to be, Dick Tracy.
Yeah, I can't really remember that.
Well, watch the Dick Tracy thing. This was a science fiction, and now it's a reality. But not just the technology, also the wealth that's been created. So, like 1971 is when Silicon Valley, the term was coined. That was when Intel invented the first microprocessor. So that's maybe the beginning of this. That's one date to set it from, although there was roots before that. Now California is a $4 trillion economy. If we were a country, we would be number 4th. There's only 3 countries ahead of us. The US, China, and Germany are the only countries. Yeah, it's true.
That'd be India.
No, India is, California as a country, if it were a country, California's economy is bigger than India's economy.
That is so impressive.
Isn't that incredible? But during that same period of time, all the indicators of poverty, whether you take it homelessness, that's been in the news a lot because, that's right in your face.
Yeah.
Whether it's human trafficking, whether it's unequal access to justice, mass incarceration, food insecurity. Do you know food insecurity in the Bay Area is double the national average? Did you know that California has the highest rates of poverty of any of the 50 states? So during this period of unprecedented wealth, we've also not tackled the most important problems. But I like to switch that around and say, well, every problem is an opportunity. And I believe that's the next forefront of innovation. And if we can bring the skill for innovation and the fact that we have a heart and we desire to help the poor, if we could bring those together, I think we could create a human flourishing for all.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's what's really important. That's what the Innovate podcast is all about.
I have heard a lot of the very impactful things that you've said, like a homeless museum, which is such a beautiful idea that it's something that truly doesn't exist in the future. And it's so profound that yet living in somewhere that's the fourth largest economy in the entire world, that is insane, absolutely mind-blowing. Yet we still have these other numbers that we don't like to talk about that much, like the homelessness. And why do you think it is? Because I think the best way to tackle a problem is to first know what the problem
I
is.
think that's pretty much
Why
the only
do you
way.
think it happened? That yet, even though we live in a place like California with a $4 trillion economy, we still have had these few things lack in following our progress.
I wouldn't say it's a few things. I would say this is a core problem. I mean, you know, they say a rising tide lifts all ships. And we as California are trying to differentiate ourselves politically, you know, from the rest of the nations. We're the ones that are merciful. We're the ones who care for the poor. How did we get in this situation, though? If we have this heart for mercy, you know, I don't really like to, I mean, I can go in on my own theories and the history of it, of what are the roots of it, why is there such inequality that's driving it? But that's only going to get you so far and probably going to start an argument. I think we just have to face and realize that it is. Okay, and this is the reality that we're in. And is this the reality that we want in the future? I don't think anybody wants it. I don't talk to anybody on either side who wants a future of a dystopian future. The issue is, how do we change that? And you're right. The first step is we have to acknowledge it. We have to look at it.
We have to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
I've heard some of the ideas that you have told me about how we can solve this deep problem in our society. Can you tell me more about some of those ideas that you've told me?
You're flipping it around. Do you want to interview
Yeah.
me? Sure. Okay. So, well, no, you tell me, what's one of the things that I've said that inspired you specifically? You talked about the homeless museum.
I think the homeless museum was one of those moments where a conversation turns into a beautiful idea, and it's a moment where you're
have you ever
unable
been to
stop smiling.
Alcatraz?
No, I haven't actually
It's
personally.
quite an incredible experience. I never went there. You know, we've lived here 30 years. I didn't go there till our family, my wife's from Portugal. They visited from Portugal and they wanted to go visit it. So then we finally went there. It's a very, very interesting experience. And now, you know, it's no longer a prison. It hasn't been a prison for a very long time, but they have a museum there. And then we play in San Quentin. And, you know how we see pictures of, Steinbeck and the Great Depression, and we see these shanty towns and people living on the streets, and it's very historic, you know, and this is what happened, and we want to remember this period. Or when I went through college, in our history course, there was one 2-week period where, I mean, they gave a trigger warning before everyone, and they said, we are going to study the Holocaust. And that was really emotionally raw. I mean, it's difficult. And they're showing these pictures of just dark human depravity. You know, this is R-rated stuff. And they're showing it. And the purpose was so we don't forget these things and we learn from it so that it never happens again. But you have perspective. That happened in the past. Now we're having a class to educate people who are no longer living in that reality. And so going to San Quentin to play basketball there, which is, you know, it's similar to Alcatraz. It's right on the water. There's this incredible beauty to Alcatraz, you know. It's also dreadful, and you hear the stories about it. But San Quentin, you know, and the irony that this is some of the most valuable real estate in the world. And yet society thinks these are the throwaway people. I don't think that. And I don't think you would. I don't think nobody who actually goes there, and connects with those people, that your paradigm completely shifts, because you realize these are people, the broad diversity of people, you know, like one of the incarcerated brothers said, there's some people in here that you don't ever want to get out of here, you know. There's people who've done some very, very dark things there. The people we know who are playing part of the basketball program, I mean, they're amazing people, and some of them, it's all different backgrounds, you know. Some are in for a short time, some are in for a long time. A lot of them have done some really dark things, but you build a relationship with them and you realize they're human beings and they're incredibly creative and they've learned and this was their darkest point. Who wants to be defined by their darkest point?
Mhm.
Their lives have turned around. Now they're mentors. They're helping one another. It's incredible. My friend Brian, who's on the advisory board of Innovate, I met him in prison. He was in for nearly 30 years. He's now out. He won an Emmy for a video piece that he produced inside.
So amazing.
What if mass incarceration could be a problem that we solve? And that we don't have prisons, or we don't have as many prisons, because they're just not needed. What would San Quentin then become? What if it was some of the most beautiful, what if it's developed like the rest of Sausalito and this incredible, it could have a 4 or 5 star resort there. And yet we had a museum that said what this used to be so that people could remember it, because we've moved beyond that. So things like that inspire me, and I believe we can solve these problems.
That really just makes me think about how we tend to say things like learn through history. Like learn from what you mess up in history, please. And yet we're still human and we just don't, to a large extent.
Yeah, if you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it.
Yeah. But that makes me think of this thought of, does that mean that we should try and do everything to just make sure that this we learn from? Like I saw this thing yesterday that someone made this, they took this AI bot and they gave it $2,000 and they said, you have to spend $1 for your own personal expenses from what it takes to be in existence as an AI every half hour. And you have freedom to go and provide for yourself in whatever way you need online through the internet. And I'm looking through the comments and people are like, this is straight out of a movie. Why is it that people just want to do anything they can just because you can do it? And it brings this idea of...
So if I understand, he told the bot, you have to pay $1 every
half hour.
Every half hour, go do what you can to generate revenue, but you have to generate at least $1 every 30 minutes, or you're in big trouble. Did he have 30 minutes to go figure out $1, or did he say you've got 24 hours and then you have to pay back $48?
I'm not completely sure the way that it was done, but it's an interesting idea to say that that's what you're going to do. And it makes me think about how we need to learn from the things that we do, but does that mean that we need to just try everything just because we can try it? When you're talking about prison, it reminds me that we can easily be defined by something that happens in our past or by people who don't even really relate to us, like past family members, where just because you have a last name, you are thought of completely differently. That's something that I think is a problem that doesn't even really get thought of, where everybody in prison is defined by the select moment, and then defined by they have to go to court, and defined by they have to live in this place now with people that they don't want to live with. And they are forced to be defined by this moment that they are now being told to try as hard as they can to abandon.
That's why, if you'll notice, I try to use the term incarcerated. I call them my incarcerated brothers, because my friend Brian confronted me on that. He says, don't call us inmates, because it's inmate number. And he says, we're not a number, we're human beings. He says, call us incarcerated individuals. I chose incarcerated brothers because
they're your brothers.
They're my brothers, yeah. And that reminds me. And, my initial reaction was, man, that's a mouthful, man. Inmate's a lot easier. But then I thought, no, I'm going to make that effort every time because I'm honoring them, and it reminds me that they're human beings. And really, that was the transition for me going from whatever opinions I had, which would have been much more. They're probably there because they deserve it, like that's the law. They did something bad. They're paying for it, to realizing that the situation is far more complex. There's no easy answers, particularly when you hear about what they went through as children and the trauma that they faced. And, that does not excuse their behavior, but it helps you understand it and empathize. But then more importantly, wow, like we get to see their better side. We connect through basketball. We're playing. It's something we love, and it's a beautiful experience. Yeah. But I want to talk about you. Okay. So we interview lived experience experts. Okay. So
that's such a beautiful way to say someone who's lived life.
Yeah. And I mean, so, I've interviewed, Henry Kestner. That this episode came out before this. Whoever's watching this can go back and see that episode with Henry Kestner.
Yeah, he's a pretty amazing human.
Yeah, he's launched quite a few very, very successful companies. Runs a VC firm. He founded Faith Driven Entrepreneur. Okay, so but you're an expert in being. How old are you?
I'm 16.
You're an expert in being 16, being a Silicon Valley native. You're an expert. I mean, your family's been here, generations back.
Yeah, Dad always likes to say, family's been here for over 10 generations, which is quite an amazing thing. It isn't too frequent that happens, where your family stayed in the same place and never moved for so long.
So this is going to be a very, very important interview, because people are going to look back 20 years from now and realize, wow, he interviewed and he knew he was interviewing one of the titans of, I don't know if it'll still be called Silicon Valley, but one of the titans of Silicon Valley at that crucial time, and we get an insight into how your values, in your formative years, how they were shaped. And they're going to look back and say, oh, wow, this has been one of the guys that completely, took it to a whole nother level, So tell me, what drives you? What drives you as a 16-year-old?
I want to always push myself to do more for the creator that I believe in. There's things throughout my life that, in a way, prove that there's something that's greater than me, and I want to try and help that be known by the rest of the world, and whatever that means. And I also want to try and live in a way that I feel satisfied with. But that's such a deep question that I couldn't give the perfect answer.
So you're a faith guy. You recently got baptized.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about that. What does your faith mean to you?
Well, that's such a deep question. My faith to me means that I'm someone who believes in Jesus of Nazareth and what he said, and that I want to try and listen to his teachings and actually apply them to myself. Sometimes I don't know what that means. Sometimes I tell myself I do. But I want to strive to be like that, because I believe that it's the best possible life I could live, and that's really what my faith means to me.
Okay, so give me a concrete example. You said sometimes you don't know what it means, and sometimes you
I tell myself I do.
Oh, okay. So tell me once where you had a victory, like where you felt that you followed Jesus and were like him.
I think there's plenty of moments throughout my life that I think I've done amazing at.
Okay, so
but I wouldn't really want to give a specific example, because.
Well, I'm going to ask you the negative first. So don't worry. I'll if you get full of pride, I'll cut you down.
Oh,
I just want it concrete. I want it concrete. Okay, one way. I'll explain for you. One way, Jesus chose to get baptized, and you followed him. You chose to get baptized.
Seriously.
Okay, so but what's a concrete way? You're going to. He lived in the Middle East. 2 millennia ago. You live here in Santa Cruz.
That he actually really did.
Yeah.
2,000 years ago, and yet so many people claim to have a close relationship with that person. that's such an amazing thing that that is the way that it has been. So many humans have said the name Jesus in 2,000 years. It's amazing.
And
I
he wasn't
think-
even called Jesus.
Yeah, it was Yeshua.
Yeshua, yeah.
I wonder
We're probably
when it
not pronouncing
was.
it right.
When
Plus,
it was over the time.
well, plus the other thing is Jesus was not Jesus, it was Jesus. You know, in the sense that Jesus is just a name that
Yeah.
they used in Spanish. So you can be Jesus Christos, or you can just be Jesus. You know, it was when he was walking, it was just a name. It's a very common name. You know, now
It's
it's
a common name.
Oh yeah, yeah. And in fact, Joshua, Yeshua can be pronounced Joshua or
Oh.
Jesus. That's the same name. So Joshua, what's his name too?
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was a common name.
It's
It
a,
wasn't
it's a
like,
cultural name in a way.
yeah. So Christos, which is Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Messiah. The Messiah was a title that would have been exemplary. So if he called himself the Messiah, that would have stood out. But just, you know, Jesus was just a common name. Okay, but you said you hold the scriptures highly. So have you read them? Do you read them?
Yeah, well, if you want a concrete example,
Yeah.
You said one of that Jesus himself was baptized.
Yeah.
That story itself is amazing. That he went to his older cousin John the Baptist, who was telling everybody this amazing person's gonna come, and then John the Baptist, someone who was constantly saying that he was going to be so amazing that he's not even worthy to untie his sandals. Like that's such a crazy thing to say. And then he comes and he's asking John to baptize him. And then this whole kind of culture got built around baptism as an idea. And I guess you could say that that was something that I chose to do. I wanted to be baptized because
Were you
I
thinking of
also
that
care.
story when you made the decision?
I think when I made the decision, I was thinking of how lucky I am to have all the people I have in my life. My dad, he was the one who baptized me, and I was just so grateful that I get to have such a beautiful relationship with him. But another example of a way that I feel like I try and bring myself to be someone that's similar to Jesus is that I care about actually learning about what he said. I care about actually reading something in the Bible each day. But that's a pretty basic example. I can't really come up with one right now though.
Give me another characteristic of Jesus or one of the scriptures that inspires you. Like, okay, I want to be like that. What's one of the characteristics of one of these biblical characters?
I want to be someone who looks at everybody with the purest benefit of the doubt, and I don't judge from any previous way, because that's something that's so easy to do as a human and then justify. But it simply isn't what I want to do. It's not the way I should be. I want to always look at everybody as their own individual and who they are.
So in other words, not be prejudiced.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. So you don't, you live in Santa Cruz. You live by the beach. Where do you go to school?
I go to Oasis. But I think that living in a place like this, where tech is such a massive thing, Silicon Valley, silicon has so much to do with tech, and that's why it was named that. I think it's easy to make something like this whole online world that we have, it's our world, and that is the only world we're in. And it's easy to kind of forget that we're in this world as well. And
Do you
plenty
feel that, Paul?
of people, not really as much, but plenty of people will kind of bring themselves to just say whatever they want online, where that concept of I don't really want to judge people can be easy to kind of just forget when it's something that's on this little glass screen that we always have. It's something that I've done too as well. I'm a human. But how do you think that this is going to change? Because it doesn't feel like it could be this way forever, where people just kind of other themselves from this other thing that they've made online.
Well, one, I love what you're saying. You're saying you want to be someone who doesn't judge others, and then you're grieved by seeing so much of that happening online, particularly online. Yeah, that's a big challenge with technology, and it's human nature, but that's bringing out the dark side of human nature. And Jordan Peterson talks about this. the online communication distance you. See, if I were to say something to you hurtful right now, and like, I wanted to, like, we got in a fight, I'd have to pay the consequences because I would see the pain in your eyes. I would see your reaction to pain, and I would immediately feel like crap. And so I avoid that. Okay. Online, you don't see that.
Yeah.
So you can hurt someone really, really bad, and you don't have to pay any of the consequences. So, maybe that's a problem we can solve, in the future. But yeah, that's a big challenge right now.
It's something that I think isn't even really recognized. There's a lot of those things where, since we live in this present society where all of history is there, but we have goggles on. I see this very frequently. We have goggles on, so we can't see anything else, even though there's all this history to learn from. And it's easy to, as a human, kind of just go with the motions of what we already have. Just settle with that, yeah, that's the way it is online. I say whatever I want, and I don't really care that there's someone else who might have been hurt. And that's just something we've gotten used to. But I think in the future, there's a lot of these things that you don't even realize in the moment that it's happened, but this pattern has completely changed. Like if you ask someone who lived in the Renaissance, is there something crazy happening at this present time? No one says the Renaissance because it was something that was mainly a art thing and a learning came back. It didn't have as much to do with each individual person who just was the average person who lived in society. And I think there's a lot of ways
so in other words,
kind
you're
of
saying the
parallels.
Renaissance was kind of limited to the elite, to the learned, to the artists, and to the wealthy. It didn't affect the average human being.
Or so that people just didn't realize it. Not that some elite did, but just that some people didn't. And I think there's a lot of things that now we don't realize. Like there's a lot of people now who are like, yeah, AI is cool, but I don't really want to use it. I'm cool with just doing what I have for a long time. But they don't maybe realize that we're living in this time where there is a huge cultural shift. I think as well as things like Bitcoin and blockchain, which are two big words, but basically that this is something that's really going to change the way that we operate as a human society in the future. And I just don't see the weirdness of being okay with saying something that hurts someone online lasting into the future. But what are ways that you think that we can get over this kind of problem leading into the future, where we don't just judge people online and there's a way that we actually have connection with people? Or do you think that it's going to transition to something completely different, where we all just are with together? And how do you see the future being in this kind of context?
Well, I mean, I see these as things. I see essentially all of technology, particularly the technology that's developed right up till now. The communication infrastructure we have. That now, like we have people watching us live from. We could have unlimited number of viewers from all over the world. That's incredible. Okay, but those are opportunities. Those are tools that can be used for either good or for evil. I'm an optimist in the outcome, but like what you said, the first step is to acknowledge the darkness, so you face the darkness. And that is a lot easier said than done, to really face it. It's one thing to criticize others. It's another to really look and own it and own your own brokenness. But that's the necessarily first step. But I believe the future that I see happening is a massive growth, a massive explosion of human goodness and human kindness, of people, of sacrificial love, of the love that we see exemplified by Jesus Christ, where he chose to sacrifice for others. And then we believe that he rose from the dead. But, his rising from the dead was because of the sacrifice, the self-sacrifice, the ultimate gift of love, of sacrificial, costly love. And then this overcoming the worst darkness, and the premise of, what we believe as Christians, of the ultimate of love overcoming darkness. And then you look back at history, and it was an explosion of this movement. and they overcame impossible odds over and over. And really miraculous things happened, whether you want to use the term miraculous as the way we would use it, of like miracles and stuff, or if you just say things that are very, very hard to explain, like the growth of this movement from a tiny group of
12 people.
12 people, and then you had a wider circle around him.
Yeah.
But you have them isolated. You have their leader killed. You have them persecuted and outcast, and they're in this tiny province in the Middle East that is not, it's not Rome. They don't have resources. They don't have wealth, but something happened, and this movement was, spread around the world. Incredible ways. Okay, so how do we explain that? I believe it's an example of love overcoming darkness, and they modeled Jesus. They went out and they gave away sacrificial love. They took care of the broken in their society. That season, that time also corresponded with cities growing up, and so disasters were the norm. Those ancient cities were like favelas, and they were very susceptible to fires. They were very susceptible to disease. They were susceptible to war. The followers,
Black Death. It was 50% of the population died in such a short period of time, largely because they were all.
And if you go back even earlier, like you go back before the Middle Ages, we're talking before Constantine. We're talking about this group that's highly persecuted. They believed, because of what Jesus did for them, and this ultimate sacrifice, they had to care for anyone who was in need. So they went out, and all those ancient cities have like layer after layer, and they were being destroyed. The Christians and their worldview was the only worldview that would go out and help someone who wasn't part of your family or part of your clan. So they would be the only ones helping the people who were in need that didn't have someone else to help them. And they just grew incredibly despite this intense persecution. I believe we can see that again. And I believe now we can use these tools that can be used for either good or evil. I believe there's going to be a restoration, a renaissance of sacrificial love, of people unlocking that and understanding how love can overcome darkness. And people, an example of this was Charlie Kirk gets shot. Okay. I don't fully agree with all of his positions. I fully agree that him being shot was a horrible, horrible thing. And I also fully agree that this guy was a human being. He was a husband, and he was a father of young kids. His wife is devastated. I mean, that is so difficult to go through. And she chose not to be bitter. She chose to forgive. Now, she's going to have to repeat that over and over. That's very, very difficult. But that's an example of extending grace. I have a very good friend in prison who was on the opposite end. When he was 19, he shot another young man. And at his trial, the mother of that young man forgave him. And it completely changed his life. And this man now is incredible. He's a mentor. He's the gentlest, kindest guy. He's helping others. He's still incarcerated. He's been in there it's in his 30s now. This happened when he was 19.
It's such a beautiful story getting to hear something like that. And it's when the first time I heard it, I was so captivated by the way you said it. And it's those stories of extending grace that tend to make everybody around feel just so much better about getting to be a human. Like, we have 8 billion people almost on this planet, this little dot in this little solar system with a little sun, in trillions of galaxies. And yet, I personally believe that some creator curated us in this little dot, this little solar system, and all the universe to exist in the way we have. And I think that good so much surpasses anything that isn't good. I feel like saying bad doesn't even give it justice, because isn't good is the right way to say it. But there's so many ways that when you hear a story like that, it gets so motivating to try and do better. And that's to tie into actually something tangible of today, is how I think that technology is very frequently been used to push others down in a way. But it very well can be used in the complete opposite way, where
Yeah.
it's used to bring all these stories that are amazing to people and show people things like what you're saying, because there is infinite good news out there that we can find. And hearing it is so beautiful and so motivating, and it just makes everyone want to try and give that back. I mean, if you think about it, most people today spend plenty of time hearing about current events. Something like Charlie Kirk died. Obviously, such a devastating event. Nobody wants someone to be murdered if you just look at it with a blank piece of paper, because that's not something humans want to do. We want to live. And it's awful to see. And so when we're constantly surrounding ourselves with these things that are awful, we think that life is awful, because what you see is what you see. It sounds stupid, but it's true. And so, in a way, we have this unique opportunity to change this from black to white. It doesn't have to be that we all see negative things every day, but instead we can see good things. I wouldn't be surprised if in the future there's certain things that people use where it shows them just the good news of the day. There's a lot of news websites people use now, like one is Ground News, that lets people be able to see both sides of the political spectrum. That's an interesting idea. Or you could just have the base news channels like Fox and CNN, which a lot of people consume. But I think that there's going to be something in the future that's the good news. It's not the Fox or the CNN, but it's the good news, and it shows people in an easy way, in the way that YouTube and all the other things have made it so easy for you to want to see something. It can present these good things that are happening in the world to us in a way that we want to see.
So, what do you think the biggest challenge is facing your generation? Other 16-year-olds.
I think that's probably the biggest challenge. Sorry to go back to what I'm saying, but that people are constantly seeing things that are negative. If you look back into the past, when you don't have something like technology that, or even newspapers, something that brings information to people, it's very frequent that those things are flooded with negative things that we don't really feel better about seeing. Even since the printing press, I imagine that things are constantly negative. But when you're in just a small community of people who don't really take a lot from outside, and something good happens, that really ripples. If you go somewhere where they don't really have a way to get information from what's happening in the world, it really affects them when something amazing happens. When someone has a new baby, that totally affects
you. Do you know there is no correlation between GDP or GDP per capita and happiness?
That's so cool.
There's absolutely no correlation, but there is a strong correlation between relative GDP. In other words, so people are happy if the societies are closer together, like, there's not such a spread between the haves and the have-nots, there's happiness. There's a correlation between happiness. It's very interesting. But like you nailed it. Someone else described something similar that, even when I was growing up, you have a high school, and let's say, I was in a small high school. I think there's 200 in my high school. Okay. Even if there's 1,000, there's the prettiest girl on campus. So the girls are comparing themselves to the prettiest girl on campus. In my school, they're comparing themselves to, 200 people. Okay. Now, and so whatever, their self-esteem goes up or down, and they have a small limited friend circle. Now with Instagram, you're comparing yourself with the whole world, but it's not even with the whole world. It's with an idealized, perfected version, because of their, the Instagram.
They're only showing the part of themselves.
And now it's even more, because they're faking it. Not only are they putting on makeup and getting in the perfect light to get the perfect angle and the perfect picture, now they're using other tools to enhance it even further. Okay. And so it just is devastating, I like, we didn't evolve to do that, and it really messes with your psyche, and no wonder everyone feels bad about themselves. So yeah, that's a huge challenge. What do you think the biggest opportunity for your generation is?
The biggest opportunity is to take this unique opportunity that we have in having such an ability to find out everything happening in the world and to connect with everybody in the world. In the past, you only know the people who live near you. Like if I go back 100 years and I put myself in New York City, a place where there's a lot going on that can connect you, you still only know the people who live near you, or maybe the merchants that come and go.
Yeah.
But you don't know what's happening all the way in India. You don't know if something crazy, some big revolution is happening over in China. How would you? Because it doesn't really matter to you. But in the same way that something negative could happen, something positive can happen, and it can change everybody and the way that they're thinking.
You certainly don't know it in the same time period. You don't know it instantaneously.
No, you don't. But we have this unique ability, people my age, to now be able to talk about all the good that's happening. I think that that's something that really can affect people. Also, I think another thing to change the subject a little bit is middlemen. Middlemen have been something that's around for forever. You always have some guy who's like, hey, you want this thing to happen where you go from here to here? Well, I can draw that line for you. And they do it with a nice smile, and they only put out their hand for a little bit of money. But soon over time, that little bit of money becomes more and more money, and that line has to become more and more curated to have their picture on it. That's just something that has happened in every aspect. It's just a human thing. The middlemen are there. And so it's easy to kind of forget that we can actually change that. But I think that in a lot of ways, the technology that we're making today is something that is going to eliminate that kind of idea, and we're able to just.
I totally agree with you, and I think that's one of the big opportunities. I don't think it's going to eliminate middlemen. I think middlemen add a value. What I think it's going to do is make the whole thing far more efficient, so that the middlemen don't get to leverage it and exploit others. They have to serve. They have to actually serve. They have to actually use value, actually add value. Yeah.
Eliminate in a way where it gets rid of the motivator to be greedy. People are going to do what they're motivated to do. We're humans, and so you can't always just expect someone to do what you want them to do. That's just not the way that we are as people. And as much as things can go good and go bad for our humanity, you still can't expect someone else to do good. You can always control yourself, but you can't always control other people. And so it should be in a way based off the motivations that we let someone else have. And if the technology of our day makes it so it's motivating to be kind and it's motivating not to be greedy, then they simply won't be. If I can make a little parallel to history, I recently saw something that one of the kind of ancient Native American tribes or groups of people that lived, I think it was either up in the Oregon area, where they were kind of fishermen and that was the way that they worked. They were really interesting in the way that their leaders were based off of their generosity. When I read that, I was like, whoa.
Whoa, where'd you read that?
Are you serious?
Because I've been reading, I was studying about that.
It was wild to hear that the way that they were called to lead, or not called as much, but allowed to lead by others. The way that people said, okay, fine, you can draw the line for me. I'll let you draw that line. Because we still allow people. We aren't forced to have an iPhone. But we do because we willingly let ourselves. When it says, do you accept the terms? We don't really read them usually, but we just accept it because we're used to having it. And so the line isn't automatically drawn. But those leaders, they had this unique way that their culture, the culture itself, demanded in a way that generosity is the way that you get to draw that line.
That's more common than you realize that. Wealth and prestige and leadership was awarded by generosity. When they found in ancient graves, and this is not just in one isolated culture, this is in other cultures, certain graves, people buried that with abundant show of wealth around them. And they noticed that the skeletons are deformed in some way. And they're trying to figure out, was this a wealthy king who had a deformed child? So they wanted to bury them in this way. But then that didn't make sense because there were so many of them. And there's like a skewed number, like there, more than would be represented in the general population. And their current conclusion is that the wealthy, that they were taking care of those who couldn't take care of themselves. And then they were showing off their prestige of how wealthy they were because they took care of them with abundance. So the generosity and the power and prestige in that society was directly related not to your wealth, not to your position, not to your hereditary, but to the way that you were generous to those who needed it, which is really fascinating.
That is interesting.
And if we could get back
it
to
shows
that.
in a way that when you motivate something, whether that's the best way it could have been done, or it was in a way kind of an ego-based thing, but where they were motivated still to be generous, that can be done in a way that is greed-based, or it can be done in some way where it's different.
Yeah. And to me, I mean, it's like the motivation. I think first you look at the action, and then then decide on the motivation. Like testosterone. It's something I learned about testosterone. That's good for you, young man. Testosterone is dramatically increasing with this phase. Okay. Testosterone, we think of it as testosterone motivates violence. Okay, you've understood that, right? And so the thing that the guys that get all pumped up on steroids are really violent. That's an incomplete picture. Testosterone amplifies what's already there. So, like, if you're already violent, you add more testosterone, you're going to be more prone to being violent. Okay, and it also is directly connected with with esteem and what the society awards for esteem. Okay, so if the society awards violence, you're going to see more violence. But if the society awards positive things, you'll see more of the positive things. So like an example of this is like at a fundraiser and they're having a bidding war over this jacket that's, worth a few $100s, but they want to get it, and so two guys are, they drunk a little bit of alcohol and they're outbidding one another. That's increase of testosterone. That's a play of testosterone. So it's the testosterone that's motivating these young, professionals to show off their wealth and to buy something that's going to help this charity. So it's so testosterone can motivate for positive, or it can motivate for negative things. And it's not just with the individual, although it is with the individual, but it's also with the society. What does the society reward?
I like how you're making this example where you have something that amplifies, goes from a small thing to big. That's what it does. But what that is going to amplify is based off of what's around it. If you have a violent society, or if you have just an area where that's something that someone's more prone to do, then that's simply what's going to happen. But when you have an area where you're at a charity convention and now you're amplifying is charity, then that's what gets amplified.
So I see this in prison, okay? Like, we go in there and we play basketball. Testosterone from. I mean, we're playing hard. It's like me playing against my brother. I have a brother who's 18 months older than me. So when I was younger, he was a little bit taller than me, more developed. We just butt heads, and it was full contact basketball. And there was a fine line between basketball and fighting.
Yeah.
That's how I got really good. But, he really loves me, and so there's this mutual respect, and now we're still very, very close, even though we're adults. It's like that in prison. And the testosterone is flowing high, and then you got the crowd getting in. Half of them are rooting for us, half of them are rooting against us, and then you got the refs, and we're trying not to talk too much trash, but we're talking trash to the refs, trying to manipulate them either side, like both teams do, And so testosterone is flying, but because there's this mutual respect, it's a very positive use of that.
Positive.
Oh, it's so positive. And then you have these young kids. I mean, what's really powerful is the peer mentoring. So the older guys mentoring the younger guys. These young kids, they're it's an adult prison, but they come in, and I'm thinking of one guy specifically. He was playing in college, very talented player. Comes in, and wow, there's a basketball program. Wow, this is cool. I get to play. But he shows up, it's all about himself. And he's full of himself. So he's talented, but he's full of himself. And so
the environment that he was around, it caused that amplifier of testosterone to turn into something that was good.
Exactly. He wants to play. It's his testosterone that's motivating him to play. He wants to compete. So now he gets sat on the bench. He gets cut from the team until your attitude changes. And now he's got to confront that. And yes, what happens? He humbled himself. He overcame it. He became part of the team. And that thing began to transform his life as he begins to look outward, and now the joy of playing again and the restoration, and that overflows into all the other parts of his life. Now his dreams are restored, and now he realizes, wow, I'm going to get out of here. In fact, he should be out pretty soon. I still have some eligibility. I can go back. I can still play in college, whether he's going to play in college or not. But now I can turn my life around. I can dream again. And we see that happen over and over in programs. And it's very effective. And that's an example of how testosterone, how do guys bond? We bond by playing hard together, by fighting together. That's what we do, And then out of those relationships come all these pro-social outcomes that are amazing.
This is a really interesting way of taking something and drawing this simple conclusion to it. You have this amplifier like testosterone, but what it amplifies, we get to choose. We get to choose what that's going to amplify. And when you surround it with something like a basketball program in a prison, that when you first see it, it's like, good luck with that. But then when I'm starting to learn more about it, I'm like, wow, this has brought so much positivity. The program is such a net good for everyone who gets to be a part of it. And now it's made it so that amplifier of testosterone, which is the one we're using for this example, has just made it so that everything gets better because it's amplifying something that's good.
Yeah, where if there's something negative, you could see. I mean, the guys that are in there, many of them are in there for some form of violence. Okay, and it's testosterone that amplified this negative context, and then made it so bad that they're then incarcerated. But if we can see that and then bring in and take the thing that was used for bad and turn it around and make positive outcomes for it, that's where the magic lies.
I think that something you said earlier, that when you have two groups or societies that are kind of equal in their, way that they live, then they are much happier. Or the GDP is the way you said it. When you have inequality, it means that people aren't very happy. And
I think it's also that the rich aren't as happy either.
Yeah, of course.
Which is really interesting because you think it's just the poor looking at the rich and being envious, but it's like the rich aren't getting the same amount of fulfillment either. It's very interesting.
But when you look at this, what's the best way to bring them to be even? Is it just to push all resources you can at the bottom to bring it up? Or is it to kind of help everybody to come down? What's the most effective way that you can actually bring equality? Because I understand that equality is kind of this tough term to actually tackle.
You want equality of opportunity, not necessarily equality of outcomes. And the short answer is listen to all the episodes of my podcast. No, but the short answer is access to justice. Like, we have this myth that we are a great, and there's the truth. Every myth has a truth to it. And right now we're divided politically. One side has this noble view of America. We've never done anything wrong, and any idea of systemic racism or any of that is just a myth. Okay? And then you have the other side that only wants to see the negative, dark side of American history, and these racism everywhere you look or negativity wherever you look. The reality is we're both. And I would say the easy facing that reality is the first step. But the best way, equal access to justice. That's the biggest step that's going to move the needle right now. I wanted to ask you two questions first. I was just thinking, 1971, when Intel invented the first microprocessor, I was 1 year old. I started using computers when I was about your age, and I'm playing on, programming in BASIC. I wrote my own little video game, and was playing it. And I was then in college. Okay, so it took me that long. Probably about when you were born was the real roots of the AI. I don't know what, I'm sure something happened. Now you're starting to use it. Now we're about to hit a critical point.
Mm-hmm.
What's the world? So 20 years from now, I'm going to be interviewing you, and you're going to be, the titans of Silicon Valley. Okay. What's the reality? What's the world you want to create 20 years from now?
That's a really, really great question. Thank you for that optimism. The world that I want to see when I look at this parallel between you being a kid and you're coding on the first computer, and then now it's gotten to the point that it is. And I'm at the stage where I'm getting to use AI in its beginning stages. And the world that I see, I think there's plenty of ways that people see things going totally negative because this could happen or that could happen, and we're human. Yeah, we are human, but every technology throughout humanity has created some sort of net good in a way. Nothing has completely wiped us out. I only mean we're still here. And I believe that something like AI has this ability to bring equality in a way that is fully feasible. Equality has been so tough because it's so hard to designate resources to somewhere. But when you have abundance, then there's no problem in designating resources. And I think something like AI is going to make it so that a lot of the things that are taking humans away from doing human things. And what I mean by that is that right now, plenty of people are doing simple labor jobs that don't need to be done by a human, or they're doing simple tasks like just putting numbers from here to there. And right now, that's needed by a human. But in the future, it's not as needed, and they can move to do things that are human. They can move to be creative. They can move to be a leader. They can move to be a follower. They can move to be what they're meant to be. And that's the future that I see happening, because once we have this ability with AI to bring equality because of the abundance that it will bring, then we are able to make the society that we've always dreamed of as human beings.
Wonderful. I love that. So I want to ask you another question. I asked you what you felt the biggest challenge. This is a two-part question. The biggest challenge for your generation. You can refuse this question if you want. It's too personal. Okay. I want to ask you, what's the biggest challenge you're facing right now? If you want to get personal with that. And then
I think
how you're overcoming it.
I will.
So to review, the biggest challenge your generation was facing was all this negativity. Okay. But what's the biggest challenge you're facing?
I think something I even talked about earlier, that I find it hard to stop judging other people in a way, where I'm constantly thinking about how they should be doing better, which is such a weird thing to do because I'm human and I have so many things to be doing better. And in a way that is kind of exciting. And what I mean by that is that by having a challenge, it means that I have something to grow in. Because if you never have challenges, then you never have things to really push yourself to be better at. And by having this challenge of judging people in ways that are so unnecessary, it means that I can overcome it. And I can go to greater heights, because hope is something that brings so much good.
So your biggest challenge is your own self-righteousness. And your temptation to judge others. Okay.
Or myself.
Hunted yourself.
Oh,
Okay, so
I think that's probably
how are you overcoming it?
surrounding myself with people that I know will push me to do better, and trying to actually acknowledge that there are things that I can do better, like constantly judging in ways that are unnecessary. And that by having people around me, they can push me, or by having resources in general around me, something like the Bible, that constantly consuming something that's good. Like I've said earlier, when you're constantly consuming things that are bad, it just makes the world appear bad. But there's always something that's good. Always. You'll never be in a society where there's nothing that's happening good. But there's almost always, going to be things that are bad as well. And I try and model my life in a way that I'm choosing to always see that good.
So can you give me one concrete example of how you've done this in the last week? So how you've been tempted and then you overcame it.
I think in the last week or so, there's been a few times where me and my brother have had conflict, and I get bothered in the moment because we're both being human. But I realized that we are both being human, and also that there's so much good that's happened through our life. I remember there were times when me and him used to jump on our trampoline outside for hours, and we just didn't stop because it was so much fun. Or there were times when we were playing games together when we just couldn't stop laughing. Or there were times when one of us did something funny and we just couldn't stop laughing for the entire day. And it's those moments that when I let myself calm down and just remind myself of, then that amplification that we're talking about earlier, when I make it so that I remove the negativity, because there's always going to be negativity, and I try my best to replace it with the positivity, then it makes everything feel so much better. Because in that example with me and my brother, there's plenty of moments where things go negative, but there's plenty where things go positive.
So you've been tempted with conflict with your younger brother, and the way you're overcoming it is when you face in the negative, you focus on the positive, remember all the positive, and that helps you center, calm you down, and then you're less.
And also
then you're less
to show, well, just to show grace in general, because every human is dealing with being a human themselves. I can't just ignore that he also is at a stage in his life where he's figuring things out. I mean, he's 12.
I'm the younger brother too. Younger brothers have a skill of pushing the buttons of their older brothers too.
That means that I have something better, and I have something to learn from.
Well, thank you so much. I can't wait till our follow-up interview. I want to interview, and we'll be talking a lot, but I'm looking forward to 20 years from now.
Yes.
We're going to interview you, and we'll dive deep into all that you've accomplished.
Thank
you. So any last questions you want to ask of me before we wrap this?
Well, one of the things that you're the most passionate about is that the world can be better. And you just talked about an example earlier of how we can give each person the availability to have something legal that can bring that kind of equality. What are other ways that we can bring equality that are as substantial as that? You've given some stats to why that was so good, but what are some other things that are able to really affect people? And maybe more, if you can, in a way that each person individually can care about and actually affect.
Okay, here's another example. You had mentioned the biggest challenge is all the negativity out there. And I see the fragmentation. We're arguing on both sides, and we're politically divided, and depending on your political persuasion, even things I've said, some are going to label me as a socialist, some are going to label me as a bigot, whatever. It's like, if we can come together and realize there's arguments on both sides and there's a different perspective, and be more curious, press in to learn, and not just argue and be divisive. So and then you begin to see where others see problems, you begin to see opportunities. And if we can, make that shift, like what we were talking about with testosterone, it amplifies what's already there. If there's violence there, testosterone is going to amplify that into more negativity. But if there's pro-social, competition that's making you stronger, that testosterone is going to amplify that to even better outcomes. Okay, so we have to look and just change our perspective to see opportunity where others just see problems. And I think one of the biggest challenges we're facing right now is the proliferation of a victim mindset. And this certainly isn't on one side of the political aisle or the other. Everyone wants to paint themselves as a victim. And if we can overcome that and see, yes, there's people who have been victimized, we need to honor that. But now we need to all work together and to see that these people who've been victimized can become some of the most amazing leaders. So that's what I'm seeing a lot out of my work with Vanessa Russell's and Love Never Fails. They're doing amazing work to help survivors of human trafficking who have been victims of some of the most worst, horrific trauma. And now they're raising up an army of amazing leaders. Some of the previous episodes, I interviewed some of the young ladies, and you'll just see the incredible, resilient leaders they are. But one thing, we have an IT Biz Academy that trains tech careers. Originally it was for survivors of human trafficking. Now it's grown for whoever, people who are at high risk of that, or anyone who needs it, who's in transition. And so we're educating people with a trauma background. Really what it does is it's tech training, which is trauma informed. So Vanessa and her team have gotten very, very good at helping people who have a trauma background overcome that, provide a context in which they can thrive and then become amazing leaders. One of the things we found out, kind of an informal study we did, found out that survivors of trauma are actually better at cybersecurity than the general population. So it turns out someone who's from a very negative background, who was a victim of human trafficking, is going to be better than you are at cybersecurity, all else being equal. And if we can give them the skills, you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. They've had to learn to be suspicious. They're always on alert. And then they've also had to learn how to game the system in order to survive. So now you train them in cybersecurity, and this negative thing becomes a positive thing. So that's something that inspires me. And I think that's a long answer to your question. But another example of what gets me motivated is if we can, where other people are seeing just problems and, oh man, this overwhelming problem. And if you see the stats of the number of victims of human trafficking is overwhelming. But if you can picture that same number and see, wow, this is actually an untapped resource. And we can give them the tools and they will become better than the average population. They will become amazing leaders. Cybersecurity is just one example. They become fearless advocates. And now we've got them up on Capitol Hill, and they're advocating, and we've changed some of the laws, and so things are moving. So that's what inspires me. And I think if we can amplify the right things and shift our perspective, and we as leaders, and particularly we as faith-motivated leaders, can become a catalyst to see opportunities where others only see problems, that's where I think we can change the world for the better.
I love that idea of bringing people equal opportunities in a way that lets them build themselves up. Yeah. I think it's easy to kind of just throw money at things as a society and say, we'll hope for the best. But when we let people learn things themselves, it actually brings this beautifulness to the idea of recovery, and it becomes something that is cherished, that you get to recover.
And try to distance ourselves from the political debate. DEI, once it was a sexy, hot thing, and if you weren't DEI in Silicon Valley, you were canceled. Now it's switched back, and now DEI is a bad word. And now we're reacting back the other way, and probably there's very valid reasons. But dive in and realize it's far more complicated than that. And there's a wonderful way, So I'm for diversity, equity, and inclusion by providing tech jobs to those who are formerly incarcerated, or tech training. I don't think we should lower the standard. In fact, what we've seen is they're raising the bar, not lowering it. So it's all, people, they have a statement saying the devil's in the details. I don't like to say that. I like to say the Holy Spirit's in the details. But diving in and realizing there's two sides of everything, thinking for ourselves and pressing forward. So, well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right, look forward to doing it again, and thank you for joining us. And now we're going to take a break, aren't we?
No break. We're just going to wrap it up. So, you guys look so good. I'm not even going to come on camera. You can just say goodbye to the internet.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for all our viewers. And if you have questions, send them in there and we'll address them. Are there any questions, any comments, Ian?
Nothing that was a direct question. I'm gonna play something as we come to a wrap. That is a talk that Riza did last year. She talked a bit about her perspective on artists. Also talked a bit about her supporting our sons and their art endeavors. Right now, I wasn't able to join you guys because I had to grab our sons that got out of school early today, so I had to go do the dad duty. And she didn't join you because she's in the midst of creating a bunch of art, and she has a big art show. So I thought this would be a nice way to end. So say goodbye, gentlemen. I'm going to play this video, and this will go for about 7.5 minutes for those that are joining us. Thank you for your attention. We'll be back again on Monday.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Good afternoon, everyone. It is an incredible time, actually, to be a digital artist. We stand at an intersection of technology and creativity, where the new worlds are opening up every day. So I would like to introduce you again myself. My name is Riza Yatili. I am the executive at Attention Live. I am also the producer of the Web3 AI, which is actually our event on September 14. By navigating the new worlds of digital art or these new norms can feel overwhelming. It's like we are being caught in a vortex. Vortex is created by Web3 and AI and how it is transforming the landscapes for digital artists. So this is an art that I created using the Procreate. And this is a vortex. So a vortex is something, it's a dynamic swirling force. Something that pulls in everything in its center. As you can see, this is like a bird's eye view of an ipo-ipo, or in English, a whirlwind or a tornado, right? So this is actually what exactly happening today in Web3 and AI for digital artists and in our digital art. So I call the Web3 and AI as a dynamic duo. Let me just give you a little bit of what Web3 revolution can enables, everyone, each one of us to own. It also enables a new models of ownership like NFT, where artists and creators can have control over their art. Who knows Beeple? So if you guys are NFT collectors, NFT creators, so Beeple, also known as Mike Winkleman, Beeple is the most richest NFT creator. He sold millions of dollars by creating NFT art. And every day he is creating NFT, putting it into marketplaces like OpenSea, Rarible, and here in the Philippines, Jello has the Likha. You guys can also be like him by creating NFT. So I also create, as I mentioned earlier, I also create NFT. I create NFT art. So I also try to sell it. So that's actually how the NFT can help us and how powerful NFTs are. So let's talk about the AI as a creative ally. Who doesn't know about AI? ChatGPT, of course. Every one of us know what ChatGPT is, right? So ChatGPT became the most helpful tool for all of us. I admit, the AI, when I was working as an online business English teacher, most of my students actually are hiring me to create articles. But because of AI, they don't need me anymore. All right? But it's also very helpful for digital artists. Why? Because there are many AI tools that are very creative. It helps to enhance our digital art. So if you go to OpenAI and ChatGPT, there is an image generating tool. So all you have to do is to go there and type in your prompt, create an image about this, about that, and boom, they will create an image for you. So here is an example of an art of my 7-year-old son. So here in the left side is what my son created, and he called this as a corrupted oval. He used the Procreate, and what I did is that my husband told me, why not bring this in Midjourney? So who knows Midjourney? So what we did is that we put this drawing, his drawing, in OpenAI ChatGPT, and I typed in create a prompt for Midjourney. And then I brought this together with the prompt in Midjourney, and this is what Midjourney created. And my son created lots of different shapes that he called corrupted. He has corrupted triangle, he has corrupted diamond, and all are super cute. This one is another creation of our 11-year-old son. So on the left side is created through Procreate, and same thing. We brought it, integrated it to Midjourney. Look how amazing Midjourney created that. And he also made lots of that. So we're planning, actually, my husband and I were planning, like, create more this kind of art for them, but by their early age, 7-year-old and 11-year-old, they will start earning money from creating drawings and selling it, creating into an NFT art and selling it in marketplaces. How amazing it is, right? So what happens when Web3 and AI collide? So that's where the vortex forms. So this one is an art again that I created. I created a vortex, and then I put it in ChatGPT, asked for a prompt for Midjourney, and then Midjourney created that for me. And then I searched again in Midjourney for the hand, and I put them together using the Adobe Photoshop. So I still love Adobe Photoshop. In fact, if you're still using Adobe Photoshop until now, this is really very sufficing. They also have an AI. So Adobe Photoshop already have AI. So all you have to do is go there in Adobe Photoshop, type in whatever you want to create, and Adobe Photoshop will do it for you. So all I did is that these two hands, it has actually a background, and all you have to do is remove background. Adobe Photoshop will remove it for you. By the end of my talk, I hope that you not only learn what vortex is. I hope that in this talk, you also learn how to embrace vortex in Web3 and AI by understanding and harnessing the power of Web3 and AI. You, all of you here, can also be part of a unique transformation. Thank you very much, and mabuhay.